Hey everybody, you are here for another episode of the Freedom Cast, where we learn how to be, get, and remain free. On today's episode, I have an amazing panel of educator superheroes. Okay, they've been through hell and high water through this pandemic with the children and all that. So we're just gonna kind of dig into their minds and get their insight, get some direction on how to parent our children, because it is an educational partnership between home, community, and the school. I'm using a slogan from a guest, and I'm going to introduce, but so I'm just going to go around like I see everybody. I'll ask you just introduce yourself, tell us where you are, give us some of your educational background, and let us know. So I see KT right next to me, so go ahead, KT. Let the
Okay.
people know who you are.
Hey, Kendrick Thomas. First off, educator, assistant principal, elementary, pre-K through four. Been doing this since 2001, all the way from a paraprofessional up to administrator. So I done did it all, special ed, for 20 years. And that's it. Founder of KTTV here in Houston, all about education and bridging the gap between the school and the community. And that's me.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. And Kimmy.
Hey, I'm Kimmy Tremlett, or as my students call me, Miss Tremlett. I teach fourth grade this year um, in Framingham, Massachusetts. I teach at a school that is a bilingual school, and I've been doing the job for a decade now. Uh, keep learning as I go, and I'm really excited to be in community with y'all today.
Yes, yes, absolutely. All right, Miss Shalia.
Hi, I am Shalia. I am in a K2 sheltered English immersion classroom for Boston Public Schools. I am also in a master's program for educational leadership, so I am doing that right now. I've been in education for 11, going on 12 years. I am a career changer. I love this work, and nice to be here with you guys.
Awesome, awesome. And last but not least, Gwen knows.
Hi, yep, my name is Gwen, and I am a guidance counselor at a vocational school for grades 11 through 12. Before that, I was a Upward Bound manager, and before that, I was working at the local community college with an after-school program for high school students. So I've been in education for over 20 years now, and then working in the area of guidance for 10. And I'm very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yes, awesome, awesome, awesome. So glad to have everybody here. When I was thinking of doing the educational podcast, I promised like your faces popped up, and Kendrick and I just met like not even a month ago, but I was like, oh my gosh, you're an educator, we need to hear the perspective of black males, so come on, like, so it just worked out perfectly. I'm so excited for everyone to be here. So we'll just jump right into it. I mean, the name of this podcast is called the Educational Partnership. So I did want to just start the questions about what does that educational partnership look like to us, and also mention where it's falling down. Or if you think it's falling down, I'm not going to assume. If you think it's falling down, or there's some part of it that's falling down, where, and what does that educational partnership look like to you? And Shirley, I'll start with you, please.
I would say in terms of partnership, what it what it looks like. My kids are K2, so they're really young. And I'll just go back to come forward, starting with the when we had to leave for the pandemic. I think that partnership looks like being actively involved with your families, and partnership and engagement doesn't always mean being in the building. Some parents work, their schedules are different. It's really about connecting and understanding where they are and what they need as parents for their children. So I would say for me, that's kind of, especially with 5 and 6 year olds, you have to connect with the parents to know what they need for their child and how you can support and give that to them. What I will say that was critical to our K2 team was that we had already developed and built really strong relationships with with our families. So when the pandemic happened and we went so quickly remote, we didn't have that struggle and the hustle and bustle that others in our building had, because we had already formed such strong relationships. So the only piece we really had to tackle was the technology piece, getting students technology, making sure they know how to use it, making sure their parents know how to use it. So that meant like me like showing up at the library, like stealing Wi-Fi to show parents how to log into Zoom, and connecting with people however you could to make sure those babies got on and they were able to learn. So I feel like for me, partnership is hands-on, especially with having the earliest learners. It's really hands-on and intentional. You have to be very, very intentional about how you do that partnership work. So for me, that's what it is.
Absolutely. And just share a little bit, please, about anywhere you see that partnership like not being held up. So a partnership is like a covenant, like 3, 4 parties, 2 parties go into something and everyone's supposed to hold their weight. Anywhere you see that like breaking down.
I feel like it's breaking down right now because so many families are dealing with their own stuff. We have families who are dealing with homelessness. We have families who are processing the death of parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles. And I feel like people go in when they're dealing, they don't necessarily reach out for support. They go in to internally deal and process. And I feel like they're not as quick to respond to text messages or phone calls, even if it's not a bad phone call, if it's just to say, hey, I wanted to check in. This is where, student A is, and they're doing really great here, but we could use a little more support here. The phone calls have become less. They will text and communicate, but as far as like being able to get someone on a Zoom or on a phone call, it's much less. And I think it's because people are dealing with their own stuff. I don't think they're just trying to blow off, educators and principals and, social workers. I just think that it has become so heavy. Like their lives have become heavy post COVID that they go in and they're trying to figure it out and sort out their own things. So they can't, it feels like it's adding something else, like being responsible for that. So I would say that's where that has changed and shifted since COVID for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, I completely agree. I feel like the pandemic, I mean, and that's a whole different podcast, right? The pandemic in education, I feel like the pandemic, it made us restructure our entire lives. And some people are still recovering from it now. So I definitely agree with you. I'm going to swing the same question over to Gwen, who is my aunt. So listen, if I call her Auntie Cookie or Auntie, listeners, don't judge me, okay? This is just how it goes. So I'll swing that same question over to Gwen. And what does the educational partnership look like to you, and where do you see it kind of falling off?
To me, that partnership is something that's comfortable for both parties. Parents feeling comfortable, being able to come into the school, almost like, hey, girl, oh, hey, Miss So and So, like that. Like we are very familiar with each other. And I think a lot of that is lacking. And I could only, maybe speak from the point of just other schools. Some of that, parents, no matter what parent is in the building, whether you're my student or not, if I see a parent in the building, hi, how are you? They're here. They are they're in the building. Like just say hi to them. And sometimes I don't feel that always happens. So that partnership needs to definitely be something where everyone is comfortable and familiar and just real with each other. I think sometimes there are behaviors that parents don't want to tell the school about their child because they don't want it to reflect on them, family, those type of things like that. But knowing those behaviors will be able to help us better work with the student. Like we have to work with the whole child, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, just being able to have a little more of that transparency come forward, like that definitely is umbrellaed up under the partnership as well. The breakdown, I'm not sure, and I always kind of talk about this. I'm not sure where a little bit the breakdown happened in the area between kind of the parents and the school. Like there was definitely more of a being allies than adversaries. And I'm not sure where the shift came to make it seem like we don't get along. We have the same goal. We want the child to be successful, but it's like it's a fight, and there's a level of aggression that is sometimes coming at educators, and it's like, wow, like what is this about? Because when I was going to school, like I don't remember my mom being like that, or you know except when a lady pinched me one time, but she had a reason, she had a reason to come up to the school.
Yeah.
But other than that, like I just feel that something got broken and lost, and I just don't know where and when. But I try through my work in guidance to be able to kind of bridge that with parents, so that that engagement and that homeschool community partnership can really exist.
Yeah, absolutely. Kendrick, I'll shoot that same question over to you.
Yeah. For me, that partnership, I guess looks like a ring almost of a sense. Like when mom drop off, my teacher picks up. We both have the same goal. We both want the same thing for me. So then we're both meeting the same needs, right? She just do it a little differently because mom got more freedom, but at the end of the day, she's still meeting my social, my emotional, all of those pieces. And so that's what that partnership looks like. You think about back in the day, you get in trouble, then it wasn't no, I don't believe her or anything like that. It was, I'm on the way. Yeah, and she'll show up, and man, I got whooped at school like 2-3 times. I'm sorry, my kids hear this, but but that was how real it was back then, and that was that partnership, And so then when you think about where does that falter, I don't know, because the parents are getting younger, beliefs are changing, and so then education is not at the forefront as I see it on the parent side. But then when I think about the school side, I think we got to get back to simply educating the parents. For my parent center, my specialists, they go in and they teach the parents on how to do the homework. How do you help your child? We do cooking classes, health nutrition classes, where we bringing in the parents. We're doing these forums. And so then we're creating that partnership because we know that it's still us that has to reach out, which is like the mission of the podcast, that the bridging that gap between the school and the community. But I think it starts with informing our community, teaching us how to advocate for ourselves, and then making that welcoming, warming place be the school common ground.
Absolutely. And I like that you mentioned that our views on education have shifted, right? Big time. Right. Parents are younger. I mean, different things going on in their mind. I mean, it's just not a focus and an emphasis like it was. So that's awesome. Kimmy, please wrap us up with this question, and then we'll flow right into something else.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm just going to echo a lot of what the amazingly has been said here already. I'm in a unique position where I followed this cohort from, I taught second grade and then third and then fourth. So similar to what Shalia was saying, I already had community with the families and the kids in my classroom, knew the method of communication that my families preferred to be communicated in, knew the frequency in which they wanted to hear from me, the content in which they wanted to hear from me. So I was in a really unique situation, again, like, on WhatsApp or FaceTiming to say like, okay, so this is how you're going to get on the Google Meet. All right, show me your computer, turn the phone around, show me your computer screen. All right, good. You're almost there, and I feel very privileged that I had the relationships with families and kids to start there. And I didn't need to build the community without being in person. As far as like where the drop went or the disconnect, I feel like something that's always been difficult for us as humans, for sure for me as a person, is to hold two truths at once. And I feel like one thing that we haven't really talked about in education is just for a whole year, we had these two truths existing at once where parents really needed childcare because they needed to go to work during a pandemic. They needed to put food on the table. They needed to keep a roof over the heads of their kids. And at the same time, kids needed to be home because it was not safe to be in school. So it was like, how do those two truths exist at once? And how do we validate both perspectives and make everybody feel cared for? And I feel like we haven't repaired that relationship between school and community yet, nor have we talked about the backlash of what happened with, it almost felt like they were in competition of each other. Like, you know, people didn't feel safe going back into buildings because for X, Y, and Z reasons, but also like parents needed to have kids go to school so that they could go to work. And I feel like that created a little bit of, it almost felt like in competition with each other just to get both of our needs met, like physical safety versus financial safety, and also physical safety. And I feel like that's just harm repair that hasn't happened yet in our educational community.
Agreed. I mean, I think that's a great topic to kind of unpack a little bit, like the backlash of the pandemic. I mean, that's why I called you guys superheroes, because working in the pandemic in a school with young students or just young people in general, I mean, you can't even express how difficult that was. There's no words for it. And people are still recovering. So, Gwen, I just want to, just get your insight into what does that backlash look like? I know you have some pandemic stories of you going to, children's houses. So bring all that in. This is the time to kind of decompress a little bit from that backlash. Like we're still in it now, but how are you just kind of like moving through that?
Well, it made it very difficult, to be able, you're used to seeing your students and being able to have that interaction with them. And then, in that March when everybody was sent home for just a little while, and then it wind up turning into the whole rest of the school year, and not being able to, and especially the students that that school was that safe haven, school was that place that they needed to be. And now you can't reach them. No one's picking up the phone. And so now you're at the point of, I was at the point of like, I'm going to just mask up and I'm going to have to go over somebody's house if they're not picking up this phone up over here. And finally, when the mother did, I'm like, good. I said, because I was going to kick it in like the Terminator, because I needed to know how this student's doing. I had another student, because at my school, students have the opportunity to do co-op jobs so that they can, make money. During the pandemic, his parents got laid off. He was doing plumbing work. His math teacher, he's not doing his math homework. And when I talk to him, he's like, Miss Knowles, I'm working. So it's like, I feel like, get back, like step back, math teacher. Okay, he's making dollars so it can make sense in his household. Just those type of things. Sometimes I didn't think that people were being sensitive enough. People had to watch younger siblings. They couldn't get on. Or sometimes parents were taking, because all our students get Chromebooks. The parents were taking it to sometimes do their own work. So the kids weren't going to be able to be on the until like 11 o'clock at night. Like this was just the reality of things. And we had to adjust. Like some people that didn't have, we have like this Jive where you can call through the computer, but some of the teachers didn't have it. So people, like, all the rules of school were broken. Kids had your phone numbers. You know what I mean? Like, we was breaking all the pandemic had all kind of rules being broken in the name of safety. In the name of safety.
Yeah. Anybody else want to jump on that?
Yeah, I got a story about just going to somebody's house. Man, I agree. You want to know about that well-being, but then I was saying it came to a point where if you not showing up, you got to come on back to school. You got to do something. So I would show up to the house. I remember seeing it was the four sisters, and I passed by, I drove through the neighborhood. I said, "Oh, they're outside playing. It's 9 o'clock. Oh no." Went to their house. I got to knock, and I know mom was in there because you at home. Your baby's outside. But it was a dog that had seen me at the gate and then the gate started shaking. I ended up having to run to the car. But the sad part is those babies didn't come back that year, you know. So you're thinking about just how this cycle is gonna perpetuate. But I agree, Ms. Knowles, you got to reach out and you got to get over there and check in because man, we lost a lot this past year.
Oh my gosh, you almost lost your life. I mean,
Hey.
all for the sake of the children.
Yeah, man.
Like, that's just how it is. Kimmy or Shalia, you want to jump on and just talk about that backlash of the pandemic?
I can go really quick. I feel like when I think of backlash, I think about how at one point during all this, like we were heroes and superheroes, and then real quick it became like they don't want to go to work and they don't want to teach and they're getting paid for nothing and they need to come back to work. And one day I was able to have a conversation with a parent and I said, it's not that we don't want to work, but just like you want your family safe. Like it's my husband and I and my mom who's older. I said, I want my family to be safe too. If they open school, I'm gonna go back to work. There was some people who opted not to come back to work when we went back in. So there's a handful of us for that little bit of time that we went back and then had to come out again. Like you went back in September and then you had to jump right back out again, right? Like it didn't last too long. So I feel like when I think of backlash, I think in that way, it's like we're like glorified heroes and then we became villains so fast. And I was like sometimes I would read through comments on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, like all these posts. And I was like, oh my God, it's so hurtful and damaging because that is not our truth. Like we want 5-year-olds on the screen like this for hours at a time. I want them sitting on a rug in front of me or at a table or at a desk. It's easier that way. Like that's what they're accustomed to. So that it is easier. That is where they do their best learning. So of course I would love them in front of me, but it wasn't safe. So I feel like when I think of backlash, I think about how quickly it went from like ooh to like definitely fast.
I mean, you're right. Teachers were like getting all these great posts and like hero and oh my gosh, I couldn't imagine what you went through. And then you're right. It took such a sharp turn to like, whoa, like everyone's hating on teachers and oh, they don't want to go back. I mean, teachers are humans who are susceptible to COVID-19 too. So there was such a lack of understanding in that way, and it was that division, and that's where that divide really came in. And like Gwen was saying earlier, it seemed like it was, like two gangs pitted against each other, but everybody has the same goal. So I love that you brought up that point. Kimmy, you want to go in a little bit about the backlash?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm just piggybacking as well, but I think I see that now too, where, there was all this talk while we were home and reconfiguring and redesigning and reimagining and it was really, although it was really difficult, like I'm not great with technology. I had a steep learning curve. I learned a lot and I'm certainly a better teacher because I had to be better with some of these technological tools. But I feel like there was so much talk about like the hope of where education can go now that we are reimagining it. And I feel like now that we're all back in buildings, to your point as well of like, how quickly the conversation changed, like we're heroes. And then it's like, you're preventing me from getting what I need. I feel the same way with all of the hopes and dreams and reimagining that we were doing last year. And now it's like, we're all back in the building and it's business as usual, at least in the communities that I'm in. And it's hard because it's like, oh, but there were some really great new pieces of education that were coming around, conversations that were being had that weren't being had before, really honest and direct communication between staff members at all different levels. And then it was like, oh, now we're back and like continue on with how it was, but it's still a pandemic. Families are still experiencing loss. Some families still don't have those jobs that they had lost during the pandemic. and to pretend like COVID and everything that comes with it, either on the educator side or on the family side, isn't still happening, I just think is a real shame.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're doing a disservice because we're like regressing, right? There were a lot of good conversations that came out from the pandemic in education. And then I'm thinking about in my field in mental health, like everybody wanted a therapist. Great. Everybody, wanted to see what they could do for educators and, give gift bags and supply all this stuff, and then I'm starting to think like, what was the government's role in all of this? That's where the next question is coming. Like, what was the government's role in this? Because they're also a part of the educational partnership. Did they drop the ball? Did they, not uphold their end of the bargain? That's kind of what I started to question and why I wanted to have educators who are right in the system. Like, I feel like you guys are in an army and you're right in the trenches, right? We can look on the outside, but you all put on your army gear every day, have your battalions and all that and the combat boots, and you go in, and we're just stuck on the outside, imagining and assuming what's going on. So I want to talk about the government's participation in the educational partnership.
Well, that's funny that you did say that, Stephanie, because I was thinking that when Shalea, when you had said that about how we went from heroes to zeros really quickly, because I think that the government, local had a lot to do with that. I feel in this state because they wanted that economy booming again. Parents were not going to work. Parents weren't going out to restaurants. They weren't doing that stuff. So they needed to have us be the villains in this story that they were creating to be able to get the economy going. We were that sacrificial lamb in order us to be able to get parents back out because parents were staying home because daycare was closed. Then they started opening like little Ys and stuff for like essential workers, police officers and stuff so that they could have their kids watched. But parents weren't able, and then kids were doing that. If kids, kids were in school, parents, you didn't want to go to work. If your kids were home, especially little ones, you didn't have no one to watch them. But if they're in school, then you can go to work. Like they needed us to get back in the building so parents could get back out and that discretionary income could stop flowing again.
Oh my gosh. Kendrick, I'm sending this question right over to you. But like, man, educators, I just thought like you guys were the scapegoats. You took the brunt of the abuse and all you wanted to do was help the children, the youth, the students. It had to be so tough. I mean, and to be abandoned. I mean, you were abandoned as educators, left to just fend for yourself. So great point. Kendrick, what do you think about that?
Yeah. From my position in it, I have to look at money, right? I got to look at how can I pay teachers, how you think about like Ms. Gwen said, everybody got Chromebooks. Like we got a lot of schools that didn't have that money to get those Chromebooks. And so where do you get it from? And so then they had to wait. And so luckily, though, that's when that government funding came in, right? So in one point, I'm thankful that they were able to step in because a lot of our district schools in our district don't have the money. So then it was, okay, well, we're waiting to get this. And the district has ordered something and we're waiting to be reimbursed for this. Or those pieces, or you think this year when it's more crucial as ever, I will say now we have the ESSER funds that have come in. And so we're able to focus on SEL, or we're able to hire like your ESSER funded interventionists or your ESSER funded teachers or paraprofessionals. And so for me, I will say that is how the government played a role in my side of the education piece. But looking at that money and from the way that I have to see that government participation, I will say I'll take it, right? But as far as so I can't really talk as to the inside of being abandoned because, man, we got that bread.
I mean, that's an interesting perspective too, and it's regionally as well, or locally, or wherever a person is in the education system. where you were, you got money from the government and wasn't really made to look, as bad as some other places, which would change your outlook and your perspective on what you felt the government did. And I love that we have a whole bunch of different perspectives. Kimmy, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I really struggle with this because it's anything that involves multiple systems at once. It's going to be tricky. And I think as far as like intent and impact, there are a lot of reasons and intents of like why we were put back into schools and why it was important to be there. Some of them great, like some students really did well at remote learning. I was really impressed with how some of my kids, like being home in the comfort of their own house and like being able to work at a pace that works for them, like super successful, way more than in-person learning. That was not the case for all of my kids. I know it's already been mentioned, but like we know, I'm speaking from an elementary school perspective. So having the resources to have those pictorial, concrete, abstract, kinesthetic, musical, all of those resources. I mean, you're in my remote classroom. I certainly didn't have that here. And so I think it was just, there were so many needs at once, going through multiple systems. And it was really difficult. I think one thing I struggled with, and I'll only speak for me, is at least with the local government that was influencing the decision-making for me being in the room. A lot of people who are making those decisions are not like KT, who's done, top down, bottom up, left, right, up, down, and around every single job and knows what, and has the empathy and the lived experience to know what this is. And it was a lot of people making decisions and speaking as an expert on things that they didn't have either the lived experience, nor the educational background, nor the qualifications to make those decisions about. And I'm fine with getting behind an idea where you know what you're talking about. What's hard for me is when you state something like a fact, but you haven't done your research on it. And I was surprised by the lack of no one interviewed teachers either to say, hey, and again, I'm only speaking on my experience, school committee meetings, asking teachers to come and say, how can we make this a partnership as decision-making stakeholders that have the privilege of speaking to both parents and teachers and building administrators. I just feel like there were missed opportunities through multiple systems that, who knows, next pandemic. We'll get it next time around.
Whoa. Kimmy, easy, girl.
You said we could make jokes. Is it not? Is that
No,
not?
That's not a joke, though. I mean, what qualifies as a joke? I don't know if,
We did?
Oh, I just got a little hot flash. Okay, so next time, right? No, seriously. No, but that's true. I mean, I think I, too, was shocked at the lack of teacher, administrator, school worker input. Like, hold on, how are we making these decisions? I mean, it's like having Betsy DeVos, as the chief educational person, and with no experience. I mean, I think that's where the difficulty comes in, that no one is asked, and the people who should be asked are ignored, and then you guys have to live with those consequences.
I agree. I agree. I use the analogy always, like, I'm happy to own when I've made a mistake and like know my place. And you know what, like, actually, now that I've said that, I need to take a step back because I don't know that I can back that up with, qualifications and knowledge and whatever. But I felt like it was a lot of, we had this injury and we're calling it education and financial instability and food insecurity and like all the trauma, everything we're experiencing. We have this wound and we need to go to the doctor and fix it. But I'm not going to break my foot and go to the doctor and ask for a cardiac surgeon because it's my foot that's broken.
Come on,
and I feel like that was a lot of what's been going on. Like you made it into the hospital, but your foot's broken and you're asking for a pulmonary cardiac surgeon and it's just not triaging the problem.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Couldn't have said it any better. Awesome. Shalia, please share, just how you feel about the government's, role and how everything was going. And then we're going to shift into talking about students and their mental health and, just how things are progressing and moving on.
Um, I think mine is twofold. I'll start with Kimmy because that is what I heard last. I fortunately, at a district level, I was a part of the reopening team. Like I was one of the voices at the table in that regard. But I feel like it's, there's a chain, so we start at the top. And I feel like the people who are calling the shots from the top are people who probably haven't been in a classroom since they were in college or high school or whatever themselves. So I feel like we have these people making decisions and choices, but they don't know what it's like. They don't know, they don't see what the real work is, what the real needs are for students, for staff, for administrators. I feel like, like in some cases it's like puppeteering. Like, we're making these moves and these are our puppets and we talk through them and they're going to deliver this and this is what they're going to do. So I feel like there's definitely that piece of it. And I also feel like the money piece with the government, like I was one of those people, I was very upset. Like, yes, we got ESSER funds and we got all these things, but you mean to tell me prior to the pandemic, you had no money? You had no money to put these laptops into these homes. You had no money to give vouchers for internet for these families who needed and could have benefited from these tools to help their students to learn better prior to the pandemic, to give these families access to grade level rigorous content prior to COVID. So, but all of a sudden, you have these millions of dollars to pour into districts and to pour into schools to give students what they need because they had to learn at home, right? So, when they had to, and your hands are forced, you can make these moves and put this into these buildings, into these places, into these marginalized and disadvantaged communities. But prior to the pandemic, when the need was still there, right? The need was there before the pandemic. These places were failing and falling before the pandemic happened. So all of a sudden, it was that all of a sudden for me that made me like, oh, well, that's interesting. Imagine that. Imagine laptops for every student. Wow. Imagine discount cable plans for families who could not afford it. Look at that. Like, that's how I felt. And I felt salty. I felt some type of way about it. So when I think of the government, I think about how the chain of command and how these things go and how we landed here. And yes, it was a benefit to our students and our families, but they needed it before the pandemic. So I think that was, when I look at it in that view, that's what my struggle was and how I look at the government. And I could go on forever, but those are the pieces that stood out to me. Like I was one of those people like, well, look at here, a laptop for these babies, finally, for their homes and cable and all of these, like, come on, y'all. We have the means, right? We had the means to do it, but we had to force hands. So I struggle with the forcing of hands for families and communities that needed it prior to the pandemic manifesting.
It was amazing to see where all these resources came from. I mean, my, what a miracle. Like, just all this money was on reserve, or like, why weren't these resources given, when they were needed before the pandemic? We had to be in a worldwide crisis in order for this to come about. I mean, right, I agree. That's a part that I struggled with too, because I'm like, hold on, they could have had laptops before, or cable. I mean, I see a comment, that Comcast was offering cable for $9.95. Awesome, great. They needed it before. They still need it now. I mean, so grateful that we have it now. But right, like, is this Houdini? He just kind of pulled it out of the hat. Like, how'd that happen? What's up, Kendrick?
I would just say, looking at it from my end, you think about your community as a teacher that you get to affect, but then the more you go up, in one part, the further away that you get from kids, but also the further you have to look at education as a business, right? And so then if the money didn't say, let's give everybody the laptops because that wasn't the best thing for the business, then it didn't happen, just like it didn't. But when giving those laptops became the best thing for business because I get paid for these kids that are showing up online, how do I make sure this doesn't stop my funding? Now that's when it happens. So like I'm telling you, I hear y'all because Yeah, I hear you. Like you say, what happened prior to that? But then, like I say, more and more, I've seen it in these last 5 years to where, as much as this has hurted me, I've had to make decisions of what's best for the business versus what's best for those 30 kids or those 150 kids on a grade level. And it hurts, but I'm telling you, that's the realization. So that's why those people who are up at the top who haven't been in that class still are allowed to make those decisions without doing the groundwork, because now they moved over to business and they've been in it so long. Oh, well, you just know how it works. So now you can call the shots for the business side. And that's kind of where we left at when it comes down to money and finance.
That is great. And this is why I'm grateful that we have your perspective from an administrator, right? You started teaching in the classroom, but right, the further you go up, the higher you go up in administration, yes, the further you get away from children. And like you're saying, your lens and your perspective changes, that this is a business that we have to keep operational. So whatever we have to do, and it might look bad to everybody, but at the end of the day, we're doing this to keep the business open. I mean, and that could speak to the disconnect. Not even talk about parents and teachers, but with administrators and teachers. There's like that front of the house, back of the house kind of like restaurant dual war thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's even good to bring administrators and teachers together to make sure that everybody's on one accord, because at times it's looking like, oh, administration is just doing what they feel they need to do and they haven't been in the classroom. But I love the perspective you're giving. They are running a business.
Yes.
They're running a business. Whatever we have to do to keep the lights on, whatever we have to do to keep that funding streaming in, that's what will be done. Love that, love that, love that. I do want to put up a comment from my sis, Chanel. She talked about how educators realized how important our mental wellness and health is. Let's shift there. What was discovered? So in the pandemic, but like even just before the pandemic, educators needed mental wellness practices and self-care and all that. So let's shift there. What does that look like? How do we practice self-care? What do we do to make sure we're keeping ourselves okay? Because the pandemic only exacerbated a larger issue, right? It just made it bigger. But how do we make sure that we're staying okay? And Julia, I'll throw that over to you.
Like I was telling you guys before you came live, like a lot of educators have sought out therapists, counselors for themselves to talk through what it's like being at work. To deal, for me, it's like twofold, like work and school, like to have someone else to speak to. It literally means like I have like apps on my phone that my phone goes dark after a certain time. Like it means like literally like shutting down and making the best use of your time. Like self-care, like nails, manicures, pedicures, like I have poured into that in ways. Like I always got my nails and feet done, but massages, like to really like it physically, like stress manifests in your body physically, like you have to intentionally say, I am going to put this time into myself. Like if it was not for self-care and prayer and God, like I honestly think that I would have walked away. Like before, I wouldn't have saw this school year. Like I would have been done with it. Like if not for prayer and self-care, like it is not like, I feel like before where it could maybe like you could possibly choose to, like it is not an optional thing anymore. Like it is I have to or I must to maintain like my sanity and to be able to get up and go and do what you do every day. Like it's not an optional thing anymore. I feel like in education and for mental health workers, I feel like now this is a season where the therapist needs a therapist. Like those who are offering therapy to other people, the therapist needs, I have friends who are in mental health and they now have counselors and therapists because they are counseling and dealing with the brunt of what we are dealing with and what the world is dealing with. And now those people have to go see somebody else. It's like a circle of like, we have to deal with our stuff like on a real level. So I feel like it's become very real and very intentional self-care. And those are, for me, those are the pieces that like I do for myself. And I make sure like I consistently stick with it because it keeps me sane. Like Lord, like I have moments where I have to go to the bathroom and be like, Jesus, help your daughter, because your daughter needs you right now, Father. Because if you don't come through, sir, this salvation here, that's this God. She need to keep it, Jesus. So it's really like me and God be having some real conversations in the bathroom at work, because it gets like that sometimes where you have to just walk and take a breath and breathe, and you have to do all those other things to kind of maintain that, that mental health piece for me.
For sure. I mean, you brought up such a good piece, like just making sure that there's a consistent thing going on. And you're right, therapists have therapists. I see my therapist every 2 weeks. we get it on because you take on so much. And with the pandemic, I mean, we saw an uptick in, clients. We need our own self-care. I love that. Gwen, what do you do to maintain self-care in the pandemic, but before? Because self-care was needed way before any pandemic came around.
I kind of stopped as far, because I would always be at school. That when the day ends, sometimes that's when your day begins. And, I still get there early. I get to school like at least an hour before it starts. But I like to have that downtime and, just to be able to read some scripture, be able to listen to some music just before the day begins. And then I would just sometimes be there late, because when the busyness of students coming in and out or phone and stuff, you can't always get to stuff. So I'd sometimes be there like at least 4 or 5 hours after the day's end. I'd sometimes have a 12-hour day. I don't do that anymore. No, when the day ends, when it's time for me to be able to go, like I'm gone. No more than a half an hour. Like I wait till the buses are gone, get a little traffic out the way, and then I'm just gone. I'm just not doing that. And just kind of putting it in the sense of that there's, God willing, there's always tomorrow. Like you don't have to get it all done in one day. Definitely taking more time as far as with self-care, definitely with the manicure, the pedi, and the eyebrows. And just having I've always had a low tolerance for foolishness, but it's even lower in the sense of that, don't bring that foolishness in my office, or you're talking, okay, bye, conversation's over. And, my unplugging, not dealing with the phone, like telling people, like, do not call me on the weekends. Do not call me at night. Like, I'm not being that accessible just because the phones did. Or you can send the email at 10 o'clock, but y'all better not think that I'm answering it. Yeah. No, none of that. Like I'm just straight out with people. This is what I'm not doing, because I have to have time for me. Just because all this stuff is here that could have you string to it, that don't mean that's gonna be like that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just really knowing when to say no and having no mean no. And did you hear me the first time?
The boundaries have to be put in place. I mean, removing the email app from the phone. Like I still haven't done that, but I'm thinking about it. Just detaching. And when you're in education, you want to finish everything and do everything, but like we'll be so depleted and done that we're no good to the students. So Shalia, it's good that you're able to go and have your little come to Jesus moment in the bathroom for the kids' sake. Like it's for you, but it's really for them. You want me to take this moment because on the other side of this, someone's going to be in trouble, and I might be out of a job. So anywho, Kendrick, what do you do for self-care and maintaining that balance?
Yeah. First off, Shalia, shout out to you for the move notes when we doing these but for me, I'm not gonna lie, y'all. I'm gonna be transparent. I have not been doing anything because I am drowning, right? Like I said before we talked, a lot of the time is putting out fires, right? I think about Monday. I was in a class teaching myself, right? Getting beat up. So I'm not gonna lie, I don't get a lot of time to just do so. I may do something on the weekend. We all got our favorite cheers spot where everybody know our name. So I may stop by there a little bit. But besides that, it's always pre-planning for tomorrow, right? Because probably at 3:00, another crisis happened. And now I gotta say, okay, for instance, like today, one of the parents quit, the teachers resigned the day before. So now I have a unit where there's supposed to be 4 teachers, only 1 teacher. But that's what I walk into tomorrow. And so then we say, okay, now, so I spend the rest of my evening saying, how do I prepare for that? What do I do? How do I appropriate educators? And how do I make sure students are safe? And so then that becomes this. I wake up and I try to run a few miles before I start work, right? And so that is that time, that stretch time, is that meditate time, is that prayer time. But then after, as soon as I get off that treadmill, is my secretary texting me about who's out today, right? So that I can start problem solving that at 5:36 in the morning before I get there at 7 to get ready for 8. All right, so yeah, being transparent, I don't know yet. Like I'm waiting on Thanksgiving, and I'll figure it out, and I'll come back.
I love it, and I do want to mention that, Kendrick, he goes to his little juke joint on Thursday, so this is cutting into his time. So I thank you. I thank you for your sacrifice of time.
Hey,
That is a form of self-care,
Yeah.
Where you can just go and unwind
Mhm.
and really just kind of like breathe and decompress. I was actually just talking about offering educators some spaces of mindfulness and that refresh. Like I, that's where we need to be, because what I noticed is I was interning as a school adjustment counselor, right? And I noticed that we were psychoeducating all the students, great, yeah, wonderful, and telling them everything, and they know about anxiety and all this. But the staff was left just in the dark. So if we pour into the staff like we do the students, it's a partnership in that way. Where we're building up the students, awesome. But if we're not making sure that our teachers, our educators, and administrators, and those who interact with students every day, which is a draining job, if we're not making sure they're built up, then we are failing. We're failing everybody in the school system, including the kids. So I did just want to say that. Kimmy, can you share what you do for self-care and how you take care of yourself?
Yeah, I'm gonna echo Gwen and KT a little bit too. I learned a lot about having stronger boundaries in pandemic. I was absolutely that teacher that was at school 8 p.m., 8:30 at night. All my friends, family, always like, "What are you doing?" Who aren't teachers or administrators. What are you doing there so late? Like, the kids came, they learned. Don't they leave at 3:30? Like, why are you there? I was not good at boundaries. And I think one really positive thing that came out of pandemic was I learned that this is very overwhelming and my time is valuable. And I'm going to use that word access that's been mentioned. Like, it is not appropriate for all of my coworkers, families, kiddos, as much as I love all of them, and I do, to have that much access to me. I know it was brought up about not mentioning the email, even though it was sent at 10:30 at night and they do need an answer before 8. Like, sorry, you sent it at 10:30 at night. I'm not answering that. Like, I already got my PJs on. I'm watching Netflix. Like, I'm tapped out. That's not happening right now. And just respecting my time myself. I think I always felt in a rush to answer every call, every email, especially after we were in crisis response for so long. I know a lot of us still are in crisis response. But just to recognize that I'm a human too, and start to prioritize my time. I definitely learned that was a good lesson for me in pandemic. I did not have good boundaries before, especially when it came to the workplace. I have taken my email app off my phone because it was providing a lot of anxiety and stress, which I can say has provided me with a lot of more smiles. I feel like I'm sleeping more now because I'm giving myself permission and forgiveness that if I didn't get to everything on my to-do list, that it for sure will be there tomorrow, and that's okay. I think just, again, respecting my time, making sure that I'm not always answering everyone. Not every phone call is an emergency, although sometimes it feels that way. And if somebody couldn't send you the email before 10 p.m., then it really doesn't have to get there before 8 a.m.
Yeah.
And I think that's always been really hard. I'm a reformed people pleaser, so that's always has not come naturally to me, but I'm making progress.
I love that. And I feel like most people in education are people pleasers. I mean, you get into the field because you want to make sure that everybody's okay and everybody's moving and shifting. But I mean, just putting those boundaries in place and making sure that there's a cutoff, like a clearly indicated cutoff for when I'm gonna stop. Because I mean, literally, you guys could go all day, and the sun will be up, and then you look up and the sun's down, and it's like your back's hurting and your neck's hurting because your head's been down so long. So I think I think this is all really good advice just to have in general, right? And for any educators listening, and we have some right in the chat, listening, this is just good knowledge to have. If anyone's struggling with boundaries or I don't know how to cut it off, I mean, this is it, that we have to put them in place and keep them in place. And no one is dying. No one is dying. And if they are, there's nothing that you can do about it anyway, because you're educators and not EMTs. Okay. I mean, we can offer prayers and well wishes, I mean, just putting things in perspective to make sure that we're not carrying too much on our shoulders. Um, so, okay, we talked about, your well being and things like that. I do want to talk about how the mental state of the children is now, and what needs to be improved in that way. What services need to be offered, and what did the pandemic really reveal as far as that. And Gwen, I'll send that right over to you.
I think that we were thinking a lot that, children were cooped up in the house. So you're giving them a little leadway in regards to being back in the building, maybe relaxing a little bit of the, rules, even some of the structure. That's not working. And in all honesty, like smaller children probably were cooped up in the house, but the teenagers were out there, whether they were working, they were hanging with their friends, they were playing basketball. There was different stories on the news about little super spreaders in the woods. The teenagers were out there. So, to think that we're doing some of the things that we're doing because they've been cooped up so long, or their behaviors. And it's like, if we're trying to mainstream them back into some type of structure and normalcy, then we have to put that structure back in place. Like, they can't come to the school and find it just as loose as a rubber band. Like, it's just not going to work. So there's just I just think a high level of foolishness. And you know what I just said previously about my low tolerance for foolishness. But they and I think they're just kind of getting back in the groove. They were used to being up late. They were passing, and the teachers were always saying how they're getting work 1 and 2 in the morning from kids, passing stuff in. They're on video games late. They sleep all day, then they get up about 3 or 4, play video games, weren't doing their work. So now to kind of get them back in the building and try and have them do some of that stuff, it's been a real back and forth in that respect. And I think it's wearing on teachers. And we can see it with the number of educators that have left the field. Schools have found it very difficult to even get paras in the building, paraprofessionals, let alone actual teaching staff, even the bus drivers. In our area, we've had to get the National Guard to become bus drivers because there's been a mass exodus of bus drivers. When school was not in session, we tried to employ them as much as you could, but you couldn't employ them all. They had to get jobs. Everything that we need to do, they need to do, eat, take care of bills. So they went and got other jobs. And it's been very all of that stuff is very difficult. Less people sometimes in the hall, so there's more students just out in the hall, not in class, just congregating, just kind of talking with their friends. It's like, what you doing? Where are you supposed to be? And then they look at you like,
Well,
you talking to me? So, all of that, I think we're kind of seeing that maybe we got to clamp down on some things, because it's and in the beginning, it was sad, like masks, we still have mask mandates, and from here, and if you have to keep telling everybody up over your nose, you'll be spending a lot of your day doing that. So some people are just not doing that, me included. I need my voice maybe for something else. I can't wear it all out. Pull up your mask, please. Put it over your nose, please. And then after you get on the 10th person, they're going to pull your mask up.
Yeah.
You don't want to be at that spot, but it's still wearing on. We're coming out of the pandemic, but what are we coming out into? So. Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, Mon is so funny, but I was saying before we went live, we have to laugh to keep from crying, because we're laughing, but it's really not funny, like the state that people are in, We kind of slid into talking about burnout. Does anybody want to just kind of talk about the burnout and kind of tie it into, what we're talking about with the children?
I am.
You're burnt out.
I'm burnt out. We just in November, right? Well, every day I remind myself I signed up for it, and so to think about I'm charged with this, and if I don't do it, it won't get done. I continue to push, and I keep thinking about it, and I try to make it easier. But like you say, I looked at today. I do a lot of the hiring or the requisitions for my school as far as getting people. I'm still hiring for a nurse, still hiring for a nurse's aide, right? Still hiring for a 4th grade teacher, so these pieces. And so, but the kids here, and so then we got to keep rolling. But yeah, it's burnout. And only for the simple fact of not only does that way, but the mental anguish that's going on with the teachers and every day. How can I support them, or what can I do that's fun, that doesn't seem cliche when they be like, what the hell is this? You gotta figure out those pieces. So yeah, it goes to you. So yeah, it's real. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's survival almost, right? But I gotta keep pushing. And so that's the biggest thing, because as the leader, I don't really try to say it how I feel. Sometimes it may show because I'm human. But I gotta keep charging. And so that's it.
Yeah, I mean that's real. I mean, I felt like everything you said, it's that heaviness, and just trying to make sure that it's a balance of taking care of the teachers as well as the students. Again, if only the students are taken care of and the teachers are neglected, then it's going to be a school full of students with no teachers. And that's kind of what we're seeing. I mean, we were talking about that before we came on. I mean, just everybody kind of dipping off because they're worried about their own mental health. I mean, what we went through, people are like, I can't spend my life doing this.
Yeah.
Shalia, can you share a little bit more on that? I mean, you shared a story. I mean, I don't know if you want to, throw them under the bus, but if you want to just kind of do an anonymous story.
An anonymous story where people who have been in, I know someone personally who's been in education for over 20 years and is ready to walk away and pull the plug completely. It is like he said, it's November and we have until June, and it's not like pretend, like people are burnt out, like physically exhausted, mentally exhausted, emotionally exhausted, and out of your exhaustion you still have to produce and give to students what they need. Students still need to go to school every single day, and they still need to learn. They are still going to be assessed. They are still going to be tested, and that data is still supposed to look a certain way. When I'm in a class with students who have yet to be in school, because I'm K2, and the pandemic has been going on. So I have students in front of me who have never been in the classroom. So what a student may normally know by November in terms of knowledge and content, like some of them came in knowing none of their letters in their alphabet, none of their sounds. So to what they normally would be doing in November versus now, and then the weight of like, what is this data going to look like? Like, it doesn't, like, just because the pandemic happened and people are burned out, they're still, students are still going to be middle of the year, beginning of the year, end of the year assessments. Access is still going to happen. MCAS is still going to happen. And those are the things, like, you know, that's stressful for teachers who have those MCAS grades, for students who get access. You know, we're getting to like that test about to come upon another, like, real close to another testing cycle, and it's like, is this data going to change? Is it going to look exactly the same? Like, have we done enough with students who came with some barely anything? Like, what is that going to look like? Like, you're burnt out as humans, and then if you add anything else additional to what you're doing in your day job, if you do anything else, like if you serve in church ministry, if you are in school, if you are a spouse, like, or if you're raising children, like, you have all of those things to throw into, like, we're only speaking about like work and community here. Like, what about the lives outside of that? Like, what? People are tired. Like, sometimes you just sit, and I just sit. Some days I literally, like, I pull in my driveway, and my husband will call because I'm still sitting in the car. He's like, "Are you coming in?" I was like, I am like, just, like, I'm breathing. I'm letting it roll off so that when I come in the house, work is still at work, and then the wife is coming into the house. Like, that is very real, and you're just burnt out. You're tired in all the ways and all the capacities. Administrator, I don't see, like, I know your exhaustion is different from ours, so I know what I feel like, so I cannot, like, my brain cannot even think about what principals and assistant principals and super, like, I can't wrap my head around what they could possibly feel like right now.
Yeah, it's real.
You know, seriously, I mean, a watcher said that this is sad, and it is. It's sad because, right, we're in November and we have so long to go before the school year ends. But I think it's so important that your voices are heard and that people really understand, like, this is what is happening, but there's still a level of commitment that's there. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, okay, like, y'all are talking about burnout and what's going on. I guess the next place we're shifting is what keeps you in education? What keeps you here? What keeps you showing up every day? Why haven't you quit? You know, why haven't you followed some of your colleagues or ex-colleagues now, you know, who left the school system? What keeps you here? What keeps you grounded and anchored in assisting students as well as their parents? And Kimmy, I'll shift that right over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I like how we're all being very transparent and upfront. So I would say that it's not every day that I'm like, yes, I am going to school. I'm going to change lives. I can't wait for because it is exhausting. But I have to say, the communities that have been built, both with my coworkers who have shared values and like-mindedness with me, who have gone through it too, being able to talk to somebody who's in it with you is invaluable. I can't say enough. I'm on this amazing team this year, on the fourth grade team, and just being able to talk to all of them. Like, you think that's ridiculous too, right? Like, that's just not fair. It's not fair to us. It's not for the kid. It's just nice to have people who understand on a very visceral level. I agree also with what's been said of just like, I told one of my administrators today, you could not pay me with the extra zeros at the end of the paycheck to take your job. I'm very happy to hang with the kids, which brings me to my answer of what you said, Steph, of like, my kids are so amazing. what they've gone through, unless you're at home with them as their parents and families, or you're in the room and just hearing what they've been through in the last year and a half, like I'm hearing a lot of deficit language, in the media or whatever about learning loss and all these other things with children or whatever. Kids are amazing. Like my kids learned how to run their own Google Meets. Like they're putting together Google slideshows with hyperlinked pages. And my kids are 9 and 8 years old. Like, are you kidding me? They are amazing. And the community that they've built with each other. And what's been really nice, which is new after being home for a year, is they're so excited to be back with their friends. There's a new appreciation among little ones, at least with me. I call them little. They're not that little, 4th grade. But with my kids, they're just so excited to see each other. And there's a new appreciation of being able to share space with their friends. And especially with what they've been exposed to last year with, the election and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and how they watched the community respond to keeping them safe or getting them to school or not. They've seen a lot of human behavior, and the way that they've responded is incredible. I love that I have kids that hold so many identities, and they are an ally for each other, and they understand what advocacy is, and they know the difference between empathy and sympathy, and being able to just be there to watch that growth. And they give me hope for like where we can go as a community. My kids are one of my kids practiced course correction the other day. We were talking about Sarah Joseph Hale and just Thanksgiving coming up and the day of mourning versus Thanksgiving. And one of my kids tried to put an identity on another student, which they didn't hold. And the student called them out, and he was like, you know what? That's my fault. I apologize. Let me learn from this and move forward. And I was just like, you know what? I don't think a lot of adults can do that. And it's just, these kids are incredible. And the people that I work with are incredible. And I know that everybody comes to school not because they want to harm children or make life difficult for them or have them explode emotionally, socially, whatever. I think everybody who's in education, like it's been said here 1,000 times tonight, really comes to help people. They're very into building relationships with humans, and what these kids have done is just, it's really a privilege to see every day. Plus I get to giggle with them, so that's nice. What comes out of children's mouths is amazing. Unfiltered.
Can't even imagine. I mean, kids are so resilient. I think they're far more resilient than we've given them credit for. So I love that you mentioned that. So we're already at an hour and some change, so we are going to be wrapping up. So KT, Gwen, and then Shalia will share about what they like about the education system. I do want to make sure that we talk about cultural sensitivity, the importance of that, and then we'll share some quick tips for parents. We have the holidays coming up, and what you want parents who are listening with school-age children, what you want them to hear right from educators. So Kendrick, go right ahead.
Oh yeah, man, for me, what keeps me here? One, I've been doing this since I was 20, so I don't know a lot of other stuff. But two, I've been on the campus, the campus that I'm administrator at. I was a teacher there, right? So I just really slid into that role. And when I was a teacher, I started a boys club, right? So each year I work with like 30, 35, 20 to 30 boys. And so some kind of way as an administrator, it's hard to find that time to still give to these boys, because when we have a meeting, it may be a parent that came in and I got to stop and I got to be principal. But like days like today, every Thursday, we meet and we all wear ties and we dress up these young men and they feel good through the school, and we go on field trips and I'm able to give them background, but showing up for these guys every day, because I've known the implications that it has on these young men of color 20 years from now, 10 years from now, hell, 5 years from now. So then just pouring into them, that motivates me. This morning I was able to bring in a guy who was a contractor, right? Owns his own construction company. But I was able to show them the story of our first talk in my club each year is, do you live to be 21? We've just on the news talking about this. Like, do you live to be 21? If so, what are you doing? I was able to have this brother come in and say, well, when I was 21, I was in a maximum security prison 22 hours a day, right? And so then being able to tie those pieces in and pour into these young men who are able to go and pour into other people in the school and outside the school. And so that's why come hell or high water, we're going to get up, because I know they looking for me every morning because I fundraise for them. And so we got to get there. So those are some of the pieces, man, of just, I love the adults. I love the median and being able to work in between kids, shaping the relationships, but also then working with the adults to create that better foundation of education in the building. But at the end of the day, I got into this to serve those young men, right? And those people that we see. So being able to keep that connection, I'll be there.
Absolutely. Listen, don't let the humility fool you. Kendrick is big time, okay? All on the news and the paper, like, woo, boy, you know. Just remember the small folks. Remember us when. Huh? Can you, please? Thank you. When what keeps you what keeps you rooted in the education system?
My students and my families. Like, I love like working with my families, especially my families that are kind of in the shadows, that feel that there's stuff that they don't know, whether they don't have their own experiences with education, or they sometimes might even come from countries where the police, the educator, and the priest, what they say goes, you don't question it or anything along those type of lines. So being able to help them in the area of advocacy, and then also to pour into my students, and especially, my students that come from maybe marginalized backgrounds, to be able to pour into them, to let them know that they have purpose and the importance of walking in their purpose. Really about character development. My students that are in the various shops, like if I have my automotive, and I say, like, you're not getting ready to be the first person coming out in the area of like plumbing or something, and you're not going to be the last. But what is it that separates this plumber from that plumber? That if someone calls the job and say, hey, I need Nick, I got a leak, and they'll say, oh, sorry, Nick's on vacation, and the person will say, I'll wait till Nick comes back. I said, what would let someone have a leaky faucet? I said, because you're reliable, you're honest, you got a good work ethic, you're not trying to beat me out of my money. I said, this is the kind of stuff that separates you from the next plumber. And just trying to pour that into them. Like, we want you to be good students, but more importantly, I want you to be a good person. Because at some point, you're not going to be a student anymore. Mm-hmm. And I need you to be a good person. So those type of things, just being able to pour life into them and getting them, that education for life, and not just education until you leave the building.
Yeah.
That's so real. It's so important to make students good citizens of the world. Right. They're not going to be students forever, but they really should be those lifelong students who want to have integrity and honor and those characteristics that make someone good. That's awesome. Shalia, please share what keeps you in the schoolhouse.
Pulling up.
I will definitely, obviously, the apparent pieces are my students and my families. But definitely my students. It's important for me. I did not even grow up in Boston. I had the opportunity to go to private schools, but in those private schools, no one looked like me. There weren't any teachers, there weren't any classes, there weren't any faces, there were not any experiences that reflected who I am as a proudly Black woman who loves, I love my culture. I love who I am. I love where I come from. And I look like my students. When they look into my face, they see that they can grow up and that they can teach and that they can aspire to be a school leader, and that they are brilliant and that they are capable and that they are strong. And I pride myself in being I am unapologetically Black, and I bring that to my classroom. They experience their cultures, where they come from, like teaching to and through their backgrounds and experiences. Their word problems have their names, and in that word problem is a mom who's on a bus with her child counting 4 red cars and 5 blue cars. And the boy's name is Tyrone because there's Tyrones in front of me, and there's Ebony's, and there's Sherelle. So I take that very seriously, and systemically breaking up the education where our children and their experiences are not reflected. It is very, very important to me. It's not just turning a page in a book and seeing a brown face. That is not, it is making sure that their lived experience shows up in our classrooms, in our lessons, in the curriculum. That is why I wake up every day and I go there, because I am a face that they see that looks like them. I am a face that parents talk to, and I understand their experiences. So when they send me a text message and the parents send me a message, saying, we don't have food or such and such happened, because we've built a relationship. Like, those are the pieces, understanding what life is like for them when they leave school and they go home and there's multiple children or there's one parent in the home. I understand who they are. I understand where they come from. I understand what they're going through. And I let them know it is okay that this is your story and this is your situation. We are going to work with it. So I show up every day because they need me to, and I need them. I need them to be successful. I need them to be who God has called them to be, and I'm pushing them into that place and that thing where they're supposed to be. So I show up because I was purposed. I am purposed to educate them and to push them into flourishing and growing. That is why I'm here. So until there's no breath in my body or God tells me otherwise, I will show up and do that work because their lives depend on it. Yeah. Like, I remember my first grade teachers I remember my kindergarten teacher. Her name was Miss Shaler, and I just turned 41 in September. I remember her name. I remember who she was to me. So what I am giving them, like, they will remember me. They will remember how I made them feel and what I said to them. So that is why I show up every day that I am not sick, and I will continue to do so.
Thanks.
Yes, yes, and yes. I felt like, waving my hands, saying amen. Ooh, yes. And you slid us right into the last topic that we're going to be really talking about, which is that cultural sensitivity, which is so important. And if we see a lack of it, we see a big disconnect between educators in the classroom and students. So thank you for just bridging us right into that topic. Kendrick, I'm going to shift this over to you just to talk about the cultural sensitivity piece within the school system, why it's important, what needs to be repaired in it, and whatever you want to share on that.
Man, 2 days ago, I had to talk to a student. So my population is Nigerian, Hispanic, and Asian, and African American students too. But Nigerian being the biggest population almost. One Hispanic kindergartner got mad at another kid, African American, and said, "Nigger, where does he get that from at 5?" Right? So you think about what they've been going through as far as looking at TV, being taught by the YouTube, babysit by the iPad, right? And so then he get that, but that just goes to show. I also had to deal with this last year too, where it was a young girl who didn't think anybody heard her when she said, "I hate black people," right? But remember, my population, we all minorities in here, right? But I don't know. It's not too much cultural sensitivity. It's a lot of what we see on TV or what my mom and my dad talk about behind them closed doors. See, when they come up to our school, they acting like it's all good, but we know because your baby let it slide out. Because, like she said, these young kids are unfiltered. So then we hear it. So I'm worried about cultural sensitivity because we are losing it from 5-year-olds to 9-year-olds, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, that's real. I'm gonna put up a post from my mom. She's going in on YouTube, like, just talking about what the pandemic revealed and so forth and so on. Kimmy, I'm shooting this over to you. I mean, you're in an immersion school, so I feel like you get a different perspective on it, but also just seeing where the breakdown is and the lack of that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my response would be it also has to start on a staff level. I am at a school that has a two-way program, and so we have a lot of families that come from other countries um, and mobilize many languages. But I also feel that there is this power dynamic in a classroom where teachers feel that they need to be the authority on everything. And that's just one, impossible. And two, not everyone's lived experience. Me as a, white, cishet, Jewish woman, able-bodied woman, I cannot speak to what it feels like to hold certain marginalized identities or certain privileged identities because that's not my lived experience. And it is not my positionality to try and preach to my kids about what that feels like. And I think there is a defensive-ness sometimes that gets in to the classroom where the teacher feels that they need to have, like, it's a power struggle. I think all kids should have a trusted adult in the building. And I also think it's, and it's already been mentioned here, like kids need to see themselves in their teachers, in their administrators, in the books that they're reading, in the curriculum that they're learning. It's not just one piece. And then we all have to take a slice of humble pie and take a step back and realize, like, okay, I need to use privilege as agency, but also, like, it's really not my place to be telling one of my kids who holds an identity how he, she, they, however they use their pronouns, should be feeling about a certain situation. And again, it's curriculum, staff, all of it. I know it was mentioned, you can't just, slap a student with a certain identity on a page and call it culturally sensitive. And I also think, I feel like we've gotten really into struggle. And yes, you need to be teaching accurate history. You need to do your own homework and recognize when maybe you've been taught some misinformation growing up, but also that, you can apologize to kids if you were wrong. You can let them know that you screwed up and, like, I need to take a step back and learn myself. And I just feel like it's such a community project that needs to happen. And as long as everybody's in course correction of, I can admit when I've screwed up, and yes, I'm going to do my own research and not ask you to teach me about this because it's not your responsibility for me to be educated on this. And how we speak to families and kids, I think it's all connected. And I felt like last year there was a lot of progress towards that. I'm hoping it continues.
I mean, we're hoping, right? We're hoping that it continues and keeps up. I mean, you brought up such a great point. It's like the traumatized group of people or the marginalized group of people have to double as the teachers of what's going on instead of people doing their own research. That makes it very difficult. Makes you not want to share. Makes you not want to even bother with it because you have to kind of re-traumatize yourself by letting people know of the struggle. So I love everything that you shared. That's awesome. Gwen, can you wrap us up on cultural sensitivity, that you've seen? And then we're going to just give some quick words to parents and to those maybe wanting to get into education.
I'm sure it can't be something that you're just checking a box. Whether if you're going to have some type of site review, and now it's the time to try and put some things together, like, this is what we've been doing all along. It means having those hard conversations and having those real conversations. Like, stop doing that little two-step here and there because it's not working, or whether or not it's these might be people I'm friends with, hang out at the juke joint, and now I gotta kind of pull them on this stuff. And who knows, I could have sat, while I'm sipping an adult beverage and laughed at some of the off-colored stuff that they said. And now I'm going to have to pull them on this stuff because there's a little rumblings over here in the school among the 4 or 5 Black folk I got working up in there. like hard conversations are hard conversations for a reason. But like, bad medicine, you take it to get to the other side. And that's the same way. And you can't have Cinco de Mayo and think that we've done something and we haven't had any conversation. Like we just got aesthetics going on. We need to dig deep. And people don't want to do that. And so that there's a level of frustration that happens. You know, Racism, it's a little rampant at times. Students that I'm looking and working with, and then they get behaviorals. They're on the bus calling somebody nigger, or they're in their backyard around a bonfire, and it's like, whoa, wow. And at some point, I'm just like, again, with foolishness and anything else, I said I can't have. I'm not dealing with that anymore because it's 2021. If there are folks that don't realize that good Black folk exist, and again, with all the research that you can do on your own, Google, tell me a successful Black person. They can bring, if people aren't willing to do the research, I'm not getting ready to be I'm not the teacher. I'm not. And if they don't know it by now, there's nothing I can do for them. There's nothing I can do. Like I can't keep, being pulled out every once in a while to be the display of the sensible, good Black person, and then you go back. No, I'm good. I'm done with that. So, again, the pandemic, everything that's bringing out, but also just a reckoning within myself. Like I'm not doing that. And I'm trying to get affinity groups together with the few Black people that are there. Try and do some things with kids. But sometimes it's just hard because you don't feel always that the support is there for that. And then it's like, again, is this to check a box, or is this really to try and move some things along?
Seriously, I mean, just the fatigue of trying to make sure people understand. I mean, it makes you weary. For Black people, for people of color, and for our allies and accomplices, it's like, enough. Do your research. There's enough stuff out there to know. If you don't want to know, you've made the conscious decision not to know. And that speaks a lot to the character of who you are. We're not going to be fighting it. No, you don't want to know. We just have to move on because we're still going to progress no matter what. Listen, we've been on here for an hour and a half. I want to thank everybody who's been on here. You are amazing educators. Thank you for your service, your sacrifice. Thank you for showing up, even though you're burnt out, just crisp, just at wit's end. Thank you, thank you, thank you for showing up and for just giving our students the hope that they need. Does anybody just have any last thoughts that they want to say before we end the broadcast? Definitely want to respect your time. I know you guys had a long day at school today. Want to make sure you get your self-care in, but anybody want to share any last thoughts? Please, please do.
I just want to say thank you to all of the educators and to you, Steph, for allowing and valuing our experience enough to give us a space and a platform to share. It means a lot. And to these brilliant educators, thank you for sharing this platform with me. And let's get up again tomorrow and do it. And to our parents, I would, if I could shout out to my parents, like, we love you. I love my parents. They are my students' first teachers. They learn from you first. They learn from watching you at home, and then they come to school. You are so valuable. You are so loved, and you are so appreciated. And text me, call me, like whatever you need. Like if it's not related to school, like they can't get what they need in the classroom if their basic needs aren't met, if they don't have housing, if they don't have food, if they feel unloved, if they don't feel supported. So if you need that, reach into your school communities. Trust me, there's a social worker, there's a therapist, a school leader, a teacher. anybody who's willing to help you. I just want you to know that you are loved and that you are supported. And we wake up every day and we do this for your children that you love as much as we do. So just know that when they come, my classroom is a home space. And when they come, they feel like they're home because they're loved and supported. And I feel that in this space in the room that we love your students. We love you. So just know that you are supported. If I could say anything to my families, that's what I would say to parents. If it, like, we love you and we need you. I cannot do what I do without being connected to you because you are their families, you are their parents, and you love them far more than I do. So we need you and we value you.
Oh, that was so beautiful. And that just speaks to the partnership. Like, if one group does not uphold the end of the bargain, I mean, everything just falls and tumbles over. So thank you for that. Anyone else want to share any last thoughts and comments?
Yeah. I would just say be involved to all the parents listening. Yeah, be involved. Go up to that school, see what's going on, right? Parent centers are beginning to open up. So much being able to go in. So get back in there, making sure that things are going right. Sometimes they need an advocate. Go up there, know what's happening inside of your baby school. Make that connection with that teacher, and let's work together to kind of get some sense of normalcy. Like she said, we got to put that structure back into it. I don't think it's to go lackadaisical because I'm telling you, it ain't working. Right. So let's work together to get that structure back in these kids' lives. And that's it.
Absolutely. Love that. Love that. Anyone else before we go want to make sure we're providing the space to wrap up and share?
It is just that parents, like we need you. So it's like, bring yourself, bring your authentic self. To my parents that it is that English is not their first language. Like we need you. If people listen with their heart, I can't say it enough. You can know what people are saying. And also we have to believe and know that parents from other countries, the same things that we want here, a safe environment, our children to be successful, for them to do well, they want for that for their children as well. So come, bring yourself. We need you. And I agree, with my brother. Show up, parents. Come, show. Don't just come to the school when they're misbehaving, because they're gonna start associating that you only care if they're doing something wrong, or they'll get a response out of you in that way. No. And if you can't show up, because I know that the whole structure of caregivers has changed, in the sense of, like, my mom was home when I was in school. People on home like that, they have to work multiple jobs just to try and make ends meet, and that's fine. Send big brother, send uncle, cousin. They're in the play. There's nothing nicer than to look out and see your people out there looking back at you. So, like, whatever, when you can't be there, make sure that somebody is there. And I always say this enough, that sometimes we always blame something else for the way something's happening with kids. The police chief, teachers, principal, blah. But when something tragic happens to that child, then I go into anybody else's house but mine. Something happened to my child today or tomorrow, they're coming to my house. So if it ends with me, it has to start with me. It's the police chief, then they're not gonna go to his house. They're not gonna go to the mayor's house. We want sometimes other people to do stuff. And it's like, but again, it's gonna end with me. So it has to start with me. And again, we are here to help. You're not sure what to do, we'll figure it out together. But we do need you, and we want you more than anything.
Love it. Listen, this is what we had to have this panel on. All the knowledge that's been given and shared, like, it's so rich. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Kimmy, I don't want to make you say anything, but if you want to, please do. If not, we can wrap up and really just finish this out. Again, thank you for everybody who shared. I'm praying that you do receive that refreshment, that you receive that boost of energy to finish out the year strong. You know that you pull from the energy of your coworkers and peers and family, and really be able to dig deep and give the students what they need. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your service. You are superheroes. You really, really are. You know, like you don't wear a cape. Well, I don't know if you do. Maybe you do. But you are superheroes and you are wonderful. And we would not be able to do this thing called the educational system without your service and your sacrifice. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being there in the schoolhouse, and really just giving your all. Much appreciated. Thank you for everyone who tuned in, those who are live listening and listening later on. Thank you, thank you, thank you for commenting and sharing, and hearing the perspective of our educators who don't get a lot of shine at times, or the shine they get is a bad light. So we want to make sure to give educators a great and open perspective. So this is our podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We love you, and we will see you later.